Balancing school, sports, a job, homework, time with family and friends, as well as additional extracurriculars sounds like an impossible task. However, this is a lifestyle of so many students here at WHS. While a fantastic win or an A+ on an assignment may be rewarding, the amount of work that goes into these successes is often unnoticed. Buried even further beneath the smiling face of a student athlete walking through the halls with their friends is a whole lot of stress. While we are living in the 21st century and mental health awareness has certainly improved, it is still far from perfect. By talking more about mental health, the stigma can continue to be broken. For many student athletes, the passion for sports came from their own family members. While parents, siblings, and friends can be some of an athlete's biggest supporters, they can also be one of their largest stressors. It is important to separate one's individual athletic performance from their relationships with those they love.
I first started playing soccer when I was like 4 or 5 because my dad actually grew up playing soccer, and so he kind of tossed my brother and I into that sport as well.
I was kind of like born into it almost because like my dad had been coaching volleyball, but he made it like very clear that it was my choice, which was really nice. But I think just being around it, I fell in love with it. I always got to hang out with like the older girls when I was younger, which was fun. And I think just like I fell in love with the people, the sport, and I knew that it was what I wanted to do.
I've been playing tennis since I was, I think maybe like 4 or 5. Um, Learned on public courts, and at first it started off as a fun thing. Um, but my parents noticed that I was picking up the sport fast, and pretty soon I was playing tennis at Westborough Tennis and Swim Club.
Well, my mom used to bring me to volleyball games ever since I was little because she used to have students who played. And then I just really enjoyed it. The girls were always wicked nice, and I started coming to camps when I was little, and then from there I was just kind of like fell in love with the sport.
I started playing basketball in 3rd grade through like the rec department, and I think I started playing because my dad always liked basketball, and I was just trying out a bunch of different sports at the time.
I started out through my brother and my dad. They introduced me to the sports, and I decided to keep going with them even though I did a few other sports.
So basketball, my whole family has played, so I kind of got introduced to it that way, and I just had a love of it from when I was little. And then volleyball, no one else had played in my family, but I did the Westborough camp at Gibbons, and I fell in love with the program. Meeting all the older girls really inspired me to play.
Oftentimes, we are our own worst enemy. Unfortunately, intrusive thoughts can be the difference between a win and a loss.
I think there's definitely high expectations on the volleyball team, but I think that it's okay because like they're not expectations of perfection. They're more of like expectations that you're going to put in your best, which I think is like a really good way to live in general, and they've helped like shape my own values. And I honestly think like a lot of the pressure has come from like myself and more of like trying to be perfect in that way. And I think that actually volleyball has helped me with that, because one of the things that we really like focus on in volleyball is knowing that like mistakes are a part of learning. And so I think it's actually like benefited, even though there's like high expectations. That's really helped me.
Around 11 or 12 years old, tennis wasn't fun anymore. Coaches were saying, you're getting fatter, you need to like eat less, you're not going to be able to run on the court and all that stuff. And on top of that, I was competing at a higher level, and I was competing against a lot of my friends from the club and from other clubs, and I couldn't handle it.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult, it's stressful because people expect you to like perform a certain way, and like there's definitely people who question if you should be on that team, or like how well you're doing.
I think definitely because again there's a lot more pressure where winning matters, and even just people coming to your games, they know you're on varsity, so it's kind of like a bigger deal when you step on the court, like the pressure to perform well.
I mean, I've definitely faced pressure, especially when I was younger. like sophomore, junior year, when there's a big game or like the game is on the line or there's something like that, and I'd double a lot because I'd get nervous, or I would push the ball way past the pin, or it would just be like little mistakes that I wouldn't normally make. And it is a lot of pressure, like knowing that I make the decisions on the court. Like, I'm trained by coaches and supported by teammates, but at the end of the day, like, it's that split-second decision that I have to make that inevitably can determine a game. So that's a lot to handle sometimes.
I put a lot of pressure on myself to satisfy both my coach and teammates, and then also like my parents if they're at the games, because obviously I want to perform well for them. And so I put a lot of pressure on myself when I make mistakes on the field. And so I've been trying to work on that at Tufts to like get those mistakes out of my head so it doesn't impact my performance.
I definitely think I put a lot of pressure on myself. You don't really feel it from like friends and teammates as much. However, the sports at WHS, it varies in commitment, and I think that I did play sports that required a lot of time, so that can also put pressure just because it makes it so much harder to balance your life.
I think it's mostly myself that just puts a lot of pressure on me. I mean, I've had great coaches, great teammates who I don't think contribute to any of the stress. I think it's just the internal feeling of always wanting to succeed and always wanting to do well.
I think athletics provides at times some very public opportunities to fail. We want them to be the best they can be when it matters the most to them.
Give it your all, or all you can control is your effort, are common pieces of advice thrown around in the locker room before a game. Not to say that these are not beneficial quotes to live by, but they stretch farther away from reality with each additional task on one's plate. How can you not let that essay due at midnight, your grandparents that drove an hour to watch you play, or that argument with a friend from earlier in the day impact your thought process? These outside anxieties, as well as the pressure to play well, often result in worse overall performance. With that said, mental health awareness from coaches can make all the difference.
For sure, I think that the coaching staff, etc., need to really be educated about the impact of the intensity of sport, the demands it requires, the stress it causes. They really need to better understand that. They really need to understand that, going hard is not the only way to go about being an effective coach, and that coaches really need to understand that, they can work with athletes in ways that really can promote their mental health and promote them being better in their athletic endeavor as well.
It's kind of a triangle with the student at the top, but then you have the family or whatever structure is supporting the student at home, and then the schools here. And if everybody in that group is working together, if there's a challenge, then we're well supported and ready to go. If not, it can be really tough to do that. I think a lot of kids think one of the things that we've been trying to address for quite a while is removing a stigma around mental health. So if someone's struggling, if a student has a broken leg, everybody runs up, says, "What do you need? How can I help you?" If a student has a mental health issue, oftentimes it's invisible or they feel shame about it, and they really shouldn't. The things you need to do to resolve your mental health in many, many cases are learnable skills, and you just need to go to the right people to get the support that you need.
On top of the individual work it takes to deal with mental health, support from those around you is crucial. Let's take a look at what can be improved throughout the athletics department to better prioritize mental health in student athletes.
I feel like making a lot of some practices like around team bonding and mental health can really help. I know for basketball, we had a lot of team talks. We had some practices where we would just sit and we would debrief our day, because a lot of times you bring in what happened during the day into practices and games, and being able to separate that really helps. So that's what I think is good for that.
I think encouraging therapy and just making it not as abnormal. because I think more people are talking about therapy and going to therapy, but I think there's still like a stigma, like if you go to therapy, you have to have like a mental health disorder, which is not true. I also think just continuing to realize that all of us are learning and growing, and continuing to do that within yourself, but also supporting other people, like your friends, family, and their endeavors in doing that.
Yeah, I would say, well, based on like the size of Westborough and going right into college, it's a lot smaller here, so you kind of had to adjust to a bigger, more competitive environment. But I'd say at Tufts, like the support of having my teammates and coaches is awesome, and they've helped me transition from high school to there.
I think normalizing talking about it will be really good, because I feel like oftentimes people are afraid that they're gonna get made fun of or like just be ignored, or have people be like, oh, like everyone struggles with that, when in reality like it's something that talking to other people can really help with. And I think like this documentary is really helpful because it also spreads awareness.
I absolutely think that sports positively affects mental health, in that athletes, a sport endeavor helps build so many aspects of mental health, including building confidence and self-esteem and learning how to push through difficulty and becoming resilient. All of those things are critical to an individual's mental health. So I think it can really only benefit it.
A handful of the athletes we got to speak with have already committed to or are currently in college, continuing their career as student athletes. While competition at the college level is high, it seems to be relieving to finally have a more defined path for their future.
I would say, well, definitely in the college environment, it's a lot more competitive, and so you have to worry about how there's like 25 other girls on the team and you're all fighting for playing time. So it's definitely a challenge, like thinking of having a team mindset instead of just worrying about myself and my individual playing time.
There's a lot less like what if, and I think before I committed I was like worried that it wasn't going to work out, when in like reality I had a lot of people telling me like, hey, like no matter what, you're going to end up at a place that's going to be great for you. But it was kind of hard to see that then, but now I feel like I have like a different perspective, and I also just feel like in general I'm able to like play more free, and I just have a little bit more free time because there's less work to do.
When it comes to managing stress, there are a variety of ways to deal with it. It can take time to find strategies that work for you. However, it is important to recognize that everybody is unique. What works for one athlete may not work for another. Here are some pieces of advice from some of our student athletes that we spoke with.
I've always been pretty good at being able to time manage well. I think I've learned to prioritize my schoolwork first and just give everything I have to whatever I'm doing at the time, whether that be everything I have during practice or during homework time or
I think it's definitely not easy because they all obviously take a lot of time, but I've found that like creating lists really helps me stay organized, and like asking people for help too, even just to like have them help you organize or like work with someone on a project, stuff like that.
I would really recommend, as like a student athlete, is like getting as much sleep as you can and just taking time for yourself, because it can be really stressful to be, balancing homework and school and also like your personal life. So just trying to get as much sleep, but also finding time for yourself.
I think this is something that's really hard for me, but I feel like over the past couple of years I've definitely gotten better at it. And I think the things that I do is I try to manage my time well. So for me that means making a to-do list, because I can sort of get overwhelmed every day with the amount of homework I have on top of basketball practice or any basketball games. And I think also planning out your week. So if you know you have a ton of tests in one day, maybe try to space it out and just do that type of work throughout the whole week so you don't get extremely stressed on one night.
Oftentimes I'll sing a song. Coach Spofford, one of our assistant coaches who works with setters, taught me that when you're in your own head, if you start singing or humming a song, it activates the part of your brain that like is instant type memory, so you're not thinking, you're using the memory part, which also helps you because you already know how to play.
So it's definitely very challenging, especially when you first get here because it's so different than middle school sports. What I try to do is whenever I have time at home, making sure I get my work done first so that when I go to any practice or game, I'm not really worried about the work and I can put my full effort into the sport. But you definitely want to make sure you have time to yourself as well. And that can be hard, but just finding time to go outside if you have a pet or hang out with family and friends, even for a couple hours, is really important.
As we explore mental health in female student athletes, we are reminded of the incredible strength, resilience, and determination these young women possess. Through their stories, we have witnessed the profound impact that mental health has on their lives, academic, and athletic pursuits. Let us continue to support and advocate for the mental health of female student athletes, creating spaces where they can thrive both on and off the field. Together, we can break down the barriers, challenge the stigma, and ensure that the mental well-being of all student athletes remains a priority.